But you and your father, and that you really held to the belief that, you want to play the game legally and rightfully. A lot of pressure on businesses in those days, and probably today too, to kind of go along with the mob, whoever the mob is, right?
Yeah, what kind of amazed me when I look back is that I was never approached to pay tribute to anybody. I mean, there were protection schemes going on, but nobody ever came to me and says, look, we'll take care of you and watch over you for a certain amount. I think it's because I worked on a lot of the cars of these guys that were running around. I mean, I would put inspection stickers on cars that had wads of money in the glove compartment with a .45 sitting next to it. Yeah. They trusted me.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and I think that's why you titled it Memoirs of a South Boston Mechanic, because that plays into this whole game plan. I would imagine other business people and service people in a neighborhood like that at that time also had to kind of play both ends and just be very careful.
I don't think a lot of businesses, you weren't in contact with the general public like you are in a gas station repair shop. I mean, I had a lot of accounts that were construction companies. They did their thing. They got in their trucks. They went to Weymouth. They built a house. I was on the streets of Southie every day pumping gas and fixing cars for anybody who happened to need the service.
Now, we've got to ask you about the man himself, and this is always just so even weird to talk about it, because he's out there somewhere in the world, if he's still alive.
I hope he's not in the parking lot.
No, he's not. If he is, I'll send a couple of my guys out. We'll take care of the situation. Nice reward. Anyway, he's number 2 on the most wanted FBI list, right? Right behind Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, that's true.
He's right behind Osama bin Laden.
Exactly.
Whitey Bulger. Yeah, the run-in with Whitey is a classic, and this occurs at the station.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it was a time during a lot of people don't remember maybe the gas shortages of the 1970s, but I mean, it got very hairy for people that were in the business. We were cut down to a third of our normal amount of fuel that we could sell. So we had to ration fuel to the general public so we could keep our commercial products, commercial companies supplied. And we had $2 limit signs up, and strangers would come in saying that they knew this guy or that guy trying to get a full tank of gas. Well, one day, a big, I don't know if it was an Oldsmobile or a Buick, pulls up, a guy with a hat, and he looks at me and he says, fill it up. And I says to him, can't you see I have a $2 limit sign up there? And I was kind of short-tempered that day because it was...
Oh, it's the pressure on you guys.
Day in and day out.
Oh, my God, people scowling at you all the time.
I guess he didn't like the tone of my voice, because he whipped out a chrome-plated automatic and he stuck it in my face and he says, I said fill it up. Well, it just so happens this was the very first day I had an armed guard in my office. My friend Lyle offered to stand guard.
Hold on for 1 second. You knew who this was, or did you?
I didn't know.
You didn't know it was Whitey Bulger?
I didn't know until years later.
Okay.
Until, he was very good at keeping his face out of the public.
Okay.
There were no pictures of him circulating until many years later.
So it's probably a good thing you didn't know it was Whitey Bulger. Had you known of him because of the stories in the neighborhood?
Oh, yes.
Everybody knew about him, yeah.
Everybody knew of him, but, I just stayed out of Triple O's, and that's where his hangout was.
So he flashes the chrome-plated gun in your face, and what happens then?
He's got his head kind of stuck out the window, and never really looked at me square in the face. He just kind of looked at me sideways. And so I motioned to the office, made some kind of a wink or whatever, so Lyle would know I was in danger. And I walked around, okay, and I went to the back of the vehicle. Well, as soon as I did, the front door of the office whipped open, and Lyle comes out with his gun.
Your security guy.
Yeah, aiming right. And you have to know what the shop looks like, and the pictures in the book show you that the door to the office was only 10 feet from where Whitey's head was. Right? And immediately, the car took off. The window went up, and it actually caught his hat in the window and crushed it in the electric window. And we're all laughing because I'm saying, "Oh, did you see that guy take off? It was so funny, you know." Yeah. Then all at once, I saw a wanted poster.
But then there's a little follow-up to the story, too, isn't there?
Oh, you mean about the damage to the... Well, I have no way of proving that it was him that was responsible for that, but there's a picture in the book of the gas pumps that were smashed down, and originally I thought it was an accident. Some drunk maybe wiped them out. But a neighbor had observed the whole thing from his third-floor window. A car came up, black Oldsmobile, smashed into one of the pumps, took off, went around the block, came back and smashed the other.
That's no accident at that point.
No, it was purposely done.
Right.
You know.
But staring down, even if you didn't know it was him, staring down a guy like that, who we know is pretty much a psychotic killer.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting story to tell your son and your grandchildren at some point.
You know what's really interesting about that? The garage was on East 3rd Street, and there was a house down the street on East 3rd Street where, unbeknownst to me, Whitey and his gang hung out.
Right.
They were actually killing people in that house and burying them in the cellar. He probably drove by my shop 1,000 times because you had to get to that house back and forth. But he never would come in, and I'm wondering why he chose that one day when I couldn't give him gas.
I think he wanted stuff when he wanted it. Maybe he just decided, I need gas now, and I'm going to grab it. And
it could be.
It's an amazing story, and there are probably, as we talk here, dozens and dozens and dozens of people listening in the neighborhood or from the neighborhood who have had run-ins that they just are afraid to even mention. It gives them the chills to think about it.
But what's funny about that incident, you really think you would be shaking in your shoes when somebody aims a gun at you. You don't really think about it, I guess, at the time as being very dangerous.
Well, growing up in a city environment, because then you moved out to the suburbs, and we all know the suburbs have their share of gangs and tough times. But if you think about it, the city environment, it really toughens you up.
Yeah. In
so many ways. You don't even realize it when it does.
No, I don't think you do either.
It gives you that sort of inner strength to face things down.
It's a daily environment that you're encountering. You know.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about a famous Chinese, not famous, it's famous for you and famous for me, and maybe some people remember it, a Chinese restaurant that you hung out at, but and also all the great cars that you drove and smashed. We'll be back with more here on WBZ in just a minute as we reflect on the past. And welcome back, dear friends. JR with you on WBZ 1227. In studio, Tom Cirignano. Tom is a fella born here in Boston, grew up in the area, a city guy and a suburban guy too. But the idea to fit in and constantly being the constant outsider and also fitting in, it's what we all do, and to a certain extent. But you were kind enough to write about it in your memoir, The Constant Outsider.
Jordan, I want to break away from the subject for just a second.
Sure, go ahead.
Interesting fact. 30 years to the day almost, I was on an airplane with Bob Raleigh heading to Quebec for a lunch with my sister Dolly.
Yeah.
And I think there was another couple in the plane. It was a small private plane. Friday the 13th, October, 1978, she had called in, and I guess you had to be the 10th caller or something to win a lunch with Bob Raleigh. And she called me at work. She says, "You want to fly to Quebec with me and Bob Raleigh?" And I said, "Sure, let's do it." I thought
That's very interesting. 30 years ago.
Almost to the day. October 14th, we flew.
I'll be a son of a gun.
And today's the 11th.
And you're back on the radio station,
I know,
flying on the air instead of in the air, but that's okay.
And it was a rough flight. It was very bouncy going up there.
We'll talk a little bit about your hobby in a bit, because you have an interesting hobby related to flight. But I want to get back to this whole deal. How many guys do you think, before we talk about that famous Chinese restaurant, how many guys really are in that constant outsider group? I mean, probably more than would ever be in the bad egg department.
I think it's more than you would ever imagine. I think a lot of people have the feeling that they're always struggling to fit in, and a lot of young people struggle with this quite often. And I think that there's a lot to be learned from the experiences I went through, and maybe how not to do the things that I did in some cases to fit in. Because sometimes it's just better to be the constant outsider than to do dumb things.
Well, we all have to face our past, and maybe when we come to terms with it and we realize, hey, we could admit the fact that we've made mistakes and also did some things that we regret, we can move on. Now, the book's very frank, and you talk a little bit about when you moved south and you got out of the city, which was that a decision, by the way, by the family to sort of protect and defend?
That was a racially motivated decision. Back then, Dorchester was in a transition, and people were afraid that property values were going to drop, and we were going to see a lot of crime. It was, turning from an Irish neighborhood to a black neighborhood.
Then you had busing
and
as
then,
well.
Well, the
That was-
forced busing came a few years later. I'm
yeah.
talking about in the 1960s. Busing was in the 70s.
Right.
But yeah, that's an era that was very interesting too.